The conquest that wasn't. Dark Lord Loor Moi had conquered 9 worlds before setting his sights on Earth. None had presented any real challenge, and this backward planet, with its weak magical field, seemed like it would be his easiest conquest yet. As he stood aboard his command city, floating in the void between spaces, he allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The High Diviner Vizier, ancient in appearance but eternal in essence, stood beside him, grey skin gleaming under the ethereal light of their scrying mirrors. His white beard, an affectation he maintained through pure magical energy, flowed over his black robes like a cascade of starlight. "Are you certain that's the weakest country?" Loor asked, his burning crown casting dancing shadows across the obsidian walls of his command chamber. Vizier nodded, his glowing green eyes fixed on the scrying mirror showing the vast expanse of the United States of America. "By all our measurements, Dark Lord. The largest population with the lowest concentration of magic. Not a single casta of note among them." Loor stroked his chin thoughtfully, the metal of his gauntlet clicking against his helmet. The entire world was woefully low on magic, true, but this particular nation seemed especially mundane. Their divination had detected only a few dozen practitioners across their entire territory, suspicious, perhaps, but more likely just another sign of their weakness. "The Iron Core," Vizier offered, as if reading his thoughts. "It interferes with magical generation. The whole planet is essentially a magic dampening field. A problem that could be corrected," Loor mused, "but why waste the resources on people we're about to conquer?" The invasion force was unprecedented, 3,133 war cities, each a massive floating fortress of black stone and enchanted metal, housing thousands of troops and hundreds of battle mages. The deployment alone had taken 13 hours, positioning each city with mathematical precision across the target nation. What Loor hadn't expected was the reception. Instead of fleeing in terror, crowds of humans gathered beneath his war cities, many carrying signs and chanting. Even in Death Valley, where his command city had landed, hundreds had assembled despite the scorching heat. "Begin the broadcast," he commanded. His image, nearly 2 miles high, materialized above every war city simultaneously. He'd practiced this speech for weeks, refining it to strike the perfect balance of menace and magnanimity. "People of the United States of America," his voice boomed across the land, "I am Loor Moi, Dark Lord of the Between. Your world has been selected for conquest by the Shadow Mage Imperium, and your country has the honor of being the first to be ground beneath my heel." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. The crowds below had fallen silent, their earlier chanting replaced by murmurs of confusion and growing fear. "Fall to your knees and submit, and I will allow you to serve me. Or cast forth your defiance and die, after which I will still allow you to serve me. Choose the option that brings you the least suffering." His image smiled coldly. "I will leave it to you to guess which option that is." The image dissolved, and Loor gave his forces the command to begin. Casters struck first, raining fire and lightning upon the gathered armies. Fey creatures materialized among the crowds, sowing chaos and death. The Dark Lord allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Then the thunder began. At first, Loor couldn't understand what he was seeing. The human soldiers carried strange weapons, sticks that made thunder without lightning, yet somehow struck down his casters with invisible force. Through the threads of fate, he watched in growing horror as holes appeared in whatever these weapons pointed at, including his supposedly invincible warriors. "The casters are falling back," Vizier reported, his eternal confidence finally showing cracks. "The thundersticks, they're hitting targets at impossible ranges, and our shields aren't stopping them." "Release the Isas," Loor commanded, his voice tight with fury. The gates of the war cities opened, disgorging thousands of Isas, 9-foot-tall shadows given flesh, with needle-sharp teeth and claws that could rend steel. They were the elite shock troops of the Shadow Mage Imperium, creatures that had never known defeat. Today, they learned. The thunderstick spoke again, and Isas fell. Not one, not dozens, but hundreds. Those that managed to close the distance found themselves facing larger versions of the thundersticks mounted on moving metal carriages, weapons that turned his precious troops into scattered pieces of shadow flesh. Dark Lord, Vizier's voice held an edge of panic now. We're losing forces faster than in all previous campaigns combined. Loor clenched his fists, watching through his scrying mirrors as his invasion force, the greatest ever assembled in the history of the Shadow Mage Imperium, was being systematically destroyed by creatures who couldn't even generate enough quintessence to light a candle. Then the flying machines appeared. They were like nothing Loor had ever seen, metal constructs with spinning blades above them, moving with impossible grace through the air without a hint of magical energy. They carried their own thundersticks, these ones leaving trails of fire that exploded on impact. "Wyverns," he roared. "All wyverns to the sky. Bring down those mechanical abominations." The wyverns rose, 30-foot dragons with scales stronger than steel, each carrying an Issa rider armed with enchanted weapons. They were the pride of his aerial forces, the terror of 9 conquered worlds. The flying machines shot them down like practice targets. Loor watched in stunned silence as his invasion force crumbled. Of the 3,133 war cities he had deployed, 68 were already in full retreat, their forces decimated by the humans' impossible weapons. Even those that were holding their ground were taking devastating losses. "Dark Lord," Vizier's voice was barely a whisper, "perhaps we should consider a tactical withdrawal." For the first time in his long life of conquest, Loor Moi, Dark Lord of the Between, felt something he had never experienced before, doubt. The humans had no magic. They had no casters, no enchanted weapons, no mystical defenses. Yet somehow, they had developed something far more terrifying, a way to wage war that made magic seem obsolete. As he watched another wave of his Issas fall to the thundersticks, Loor realized he had made a catastrophic error. He hadn't found the weakest nation on Earth at all. He had attacked one of the strongest. And now, as more of those metal birds appeared on the horizon and new forms of mobile thunder weapons rolled into view, he was beginning to wonder if he would survive long enough to learn from his mistake. "Sound the retreat," he commanded, his voice hollow. "All forces. Immediate withdrawal to the void." But even as the order went out, he knew it was too late. The humans had already adapted to their flying cities, and their flying machines were rising to meet them. The age of magical conquest was ending, not with a mystical battle of legendary proportions, but with the simple, devastating efficiency of human innovation. The greatest invasion force in the history of the Shadow Mage Imperium was about to learn a harsh lesson. Sometimes, the most dangerous magic of all is no magic at all. Operation Magic Hour. General Sarah Mitchell had seen a lot in her 30 years of military service, but giant floating cities appearing in the sky was definitely a first. Standing in the Pentagon's Strategic Command Center, she watched as thousands of red dots appeared on the massive display screen, each representing one of the alien structures that had materialized across American airspace. "Someone tell me this isn't a glitch in our radar systems," she demanded, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around her. Colonel James Chen, head of the Air Force's Special Projects Division, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we're getting visual confirmation from every major city and military installation. These things are real, and they're positioning themselves in a perfect grid pattern across the continental United States." The main screen switched to a live feed from Texas. Mitchell watched as what appeared to be bolts of lightning struck at American positions, only to be met with concentrated fire from M4 carbines and M240 machine guns. To everyone's surprise, the standard-issue weapons were proving remarkably effective against both the energy attacks and the monstrous creatures pouring from the floating cities. "Get me the president," Mitchell ordered, a plan already forming in her mind. The call connected almost immediately. "General Mitchell, please tell me you have some good news." The president's voice was tense but controlled. "Mr. President, our conventional weapons are effective against the hostile forces. I'm implementing Oplan 8888-11. There was a pause on the line. Everyone in the room knew that Oplan 8888 had started as a training exercise, a joke scenario about defending against supernatural threats. No one was laughing now. You have full authorization, General. God help us all. Mitchell turned to her staff. Ladies and gentlemen, as of this moment we are executing Operation Magic Hour. Colonel Chen, I want every available aircraft in the sky. Coordinate with NATO allies, we may need the support. Colonel Rodriguez, get me a secure line to every major command center. Lieutenant Wallace, start evacuating civilians from the combat zones. The command center transformed into a hub of controlled chaos as orders were relayed and units mobilized. Reports continued to flood in from across the country, painting a clearer picture of their adversaries' capabilities and weaknesses. The alien creatures, while physically imposing, proved vulnerable to conventional firearms. Their energy weapons, while devastating, had limited range compared to modern artillery. And their flying creatures, while fearsome, were no match for F-22s and Apache helicopters. "Ma'am," Chen called out, "we're getting reports of a new threat, some kind of shadow creatures, 9 feet tall." Mitchell watched the footage of the new enemies, geisas, according to intercepted communications. They were fast, strong, and nearly invisible in shadows. But they died just like anything else when hit with enough firepower. "Deploy the AC-130s, she ordered. "Let's show them what real air support looks like." The next few hours were intense but increasingly optimistic. The alien forces, for all their apparent technological advancement, seemed completely unprepared for modern military capabilities. Their tactics were medieval, mass charges across open ground, cavalry attacks with flying creatures, and siege warfare with their floating cities. "They're fighting like it's 1066, Chen observed, watching footage of another failed charge by the shadow creatures. "All that advanced technology, and they have no concept of modern warfare." Mitchell nodded. "They relied too heavily on their technological advantage on other worlds. They never developed proper tactical doctrine." She paused, watching as another group of alien flyers was shot down by a formation of F-35s. "And they definitely never encountered anything like our level of military technology." The turning point came when they discovered that the floating cities, while impressive, were vulnerable to modern anti-air weapons. The first city fell to a concentrated barrage of surface-to-air missiles, crashing into an uninhabited area of the Nevada desert. The aliens' response was immediate and uncoordinated, exactly what Mitchell had been hoping for. "They're breaking formation," Rodriguez reported. "Multiple cities attempting emergency ascent." "Perfect," Mitchell smiled grimly. "Implement Phase 2. Phase 2 involved a coordinated strike using every available air asset in the U.S. arsenal, along with support from NATO allies. The aliens' retreat turned into a rout as their supposedly invincible war cities proved highly vulnerable to modern aviation and missile technology." "Ma'am," Chen reported, excitement creeping into his voice, "we're getting confirmation from multiple commands, the enemy is in full retreat. 68 of their cities have already withdrawn completely, and the rest are falling back." Mitchell allowed herself a small smile. The battle wasn't over, but the worst had passed. Humanity had faced its first extradimensional invasion and emerged victorious, not through superior technology or magical powers, but through simple military preparedness and adaptability. "Begin damage assessment and recovery operations," she ordered. "And someone get me a complete analysis of their weapons and tactics. I want to know everything about how they fight." As the command center shifted from combat operations to recovery mode, Mitchell couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The alien invaders had made a critical mistake, they had assumed that a lack of magic meant a lack of power. They had never considered that humanity might have developed entirely different means of waging war. "Colonel Chen," she called out, "make sure we document everything. Something tells me this won't be the last time we have to deal with these magical invaders." "Yes, ma'am," Chen replied. "Though I have to say, I never thought I'd be filing an after-action report about a battle against wizards." Mitchell chuckled. Welcome to the 21st century, Colonel. Apparently, it's going to be more interesting than we thought. The screens continued to show retreating alien forces, their once mighty invasion force now in disarray. It would take time to fully understand what had happened today, but one thing was clear: the Shadow Mage Imperium had learned a valuable lesson about underestimating their opponents. And if they ever returned, they would find that humanity was more than ready for round 2. Breaking news: apocalypse not today. Jessica Chen was live streaming when the first war city appeared over Seattle. Her morning coffee review blog suddenly became ground zero for one of the biggest stories in human history. Guys, I don't think that's a cloud," she said, turning her phone camera toward the massive black structure descending from the sky. Her viewers watched in real time as the enormous floating city positioned itself above downtown Seattle, its dark walls blocking out the morning sun. Within minutes, her impromptu coverage had gone viral. Hashtag floating cities was trending worldwide, followed quickly by hashtag alien invasion and hashtag magic is real. Social media exploded with videos, theories, and memes, lots of memes. At Meme Queen posted, "Aliens, we're here to conquer you. Americans, new phone, who dis?" Rolling on the floor laughing hashtag alien invasion. The initial response was a mixture of disbelief, excitement, and gallows humor. When the Dark Lord's announcement echoed across the nation, Twitter nearly crashed from the volume of hot takes and real-time reactions. Did this dude really just show up with floating cities and a burning crown like some kind of fantasy LARP gone wrong? Hashtag Dark Lord Problems became one of the most retweeted posts of the day, but the humor quickly faded when the fighting began. CNN's veteran war correspondent Michael Torres found himself covering a very different kind of conflict. Broadcasting from the outskirts of Phoenix, he ducked behind a concrete barrier as another explosion rocked the area. "As you can see behind me," he shouted over the sound of gunfire, "U.S. military forces are engaged with what appears to be, well, I never thought I'd say this on air, but what appears to be actual monsters. The military's response has been swift and, surprisingly, effective. Standard military hardware seems to be more than a match for these otherworldly invaders." The feed cut to the CNN newsroom, where anchor Diana Washington tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. "Michael, are you saying that regular bullets work against these creatures?" "That's affirmative, Diana. In fact, according to military sources, our conventional weapons are proving remarkably effective. These shadow creatures, I'm hearing the aliens call them pisas, they're tough, but they go down just like anything else when hit with enough firepower." Social media quickly filled with clips of the battles. Videos of Apache helicopters taking down what looked like dragons went viral within minutes. Smartphone footage of Marines efficiently dispatching shadow creatures with standard-issue rifles became instant classics. But it wasn't just about the fighting. Across the country, communities came together in unexpected ways. In Minneapolis, a group of gamers set up an early warning system using their Discord server. In Miami, food truck owners organized a mobile supply chain to keep evacuees fed. In Chicago, city officials used the emergency alert system to coordinate civilian responses with military operations. Rebecca Martinez, a high school teacher in Houston, found herself turning her classroom into an impromptu shelter when a war city appeared over their district. "The kids were amazingly calm," she would later tell reporters. "They kept saying it was just like their video games. One of my students even said, 'Miss, don't worry, if games taught us anything, it's that aliens always attack the US first, and we always win.'" The late-night shows had a field day. Even as the battles raged, comedians were already mining the situation for material. Jimmy Fallon opened his show with, "So, apparently, the most powerful magical empire in the universe looked at Earth and decided to attack the country with the highest military budget in history. I guess they don't have Google in the shadow realm." On social media, the memes evolved with the situation. As reports of the aliens' retreat began to circulate, one tweet captured the mood perfectly: "Aliens, we have magic. USA, we have guns. Aliens, understandable, have a nice day. #invasion fail. But it wasn't all jokes and memes. Real people were affected, real battles were fought, and real heroes emerged. Local news stations ran continuous coverage of civilian evacuation efforts, emergency response coordination, and community support initiatives. In Salt Lake City, a group of construction workers used their equipment to help clear paths for military vehicles. In Detroit, auto workers converted their factories into emergency medical centers. In rural Arkansas, farmers used their crops to spell out "Go home" in letters large enough to be seen from the floating cities, though they used considerably stronger language. The scientific community was having its own meltdown. Dr. Sarah Patel, a quantum physicist at MIT, gave an impromptu TED Talk that went viral. "What we're seeing isn't magic, it's simply technology operating on principles we haven't discovered yet. Their quintessence is probably just another fundamental force we haven't properly measured. The real question is, how did they develop so much power without discovering gunpowder?" Religious leaders and philosophers wrestled with the implications. The existence of other dimensions, the reality of what appeared to be magic, it challenged many worldviews. Yet in churches, mosques, temples, and synagogues across the country, the message was surprisingly consistent: whatever these beings were, they weren't gods, and humanity had every right to defend itself. As the battles wound down and the alien forces retreated, media attention turned to analysis and implications. Expert panels debated the future of warfare, international relations, and humanity's place in a much larger and stranger universe than previously imagined. The Wall Street Journal ran a piece titled "Magic versus Markets: Why Capitalism Beat Sorcery," arguing that Earth's technological advancement was a natural result of free market innovation. Fox News and MSNBC somehow managed to blame each other's preferred political parties for attracting the invasion in the first place. But perhaps the most poignant moment came from an unlikely source. A TikTok video went viral showing an elderly veteran watching an Apache helicopter take down a wyvern. "In my day," he said, chuckling and shaking his head, "we just worried about regular dragons." The video cut to scenes of American forces driving back the alien invasion, set to "Fortunate Son," because some traditions never die. By evening, as the last war cities retreated into whatever dimension they came from, the mood across the country was jubilant but thoughtful. Humanity had faced its first extra-dimensional invasion and emerged victorious. More importantly, they had done it not through magic or supernatural powers, but through technology, preparation, and good old-fashioned American firepower. The New York Times evening headline summed it up perfectly: "Magic Kingdom surrenders to modern military, Dark Lord learns why we don't have healthcare." As night fell over America, Jessica Chen, the coffee blogger whose morning stream had captured the beginning of the invasion, posted one final tweet: "Started the day reviewing a caramel macchiato, ended it documenting an alien invasion. Still not the weirdest thing I've seen in Seattle. Anyone know if dragons tip?" #baristas versus black magic. The world had changed forever, but humanity had proven itself ready for whatever the universe, or other universes, might throw at them. And if the Shadow Mage Imperium ever decided to try again, they would find Earth even better prepared. After all, as one viral post pointed out, imagine attacking a planet so hardcore they made movies about beating you before you even existed. #Earth goes hard. The politics of defeat. The Grand Chamber of the Shadow Mage Imperium had never been so silent. Thousands of Dark Lords, Lesser Lords, and High Diviners sat in their tiered seats, all eyes fixed on the central podium where Dark Lord Loor Moi stood before the Council of Nine. His burning crown, once a symbol of his unmatched power, now seemed to flicker uncertainly in the chamber's ethereal light. High Chancellor Drow Thex, the most ancient and powerful of the council, leaned forward in his obsidian throne. "Let us be clear, Dark Lord Loor," his voice echoed through the vast chamber, "you lost 342 war cities." 347, Loor corrected, his voice steady despite the shame burning in his chest. "The mortal's weapons proved unexpectedly effective. A murmur rippled through the chamber. The loss of even one war city was unprecedented, the loss of hundreds was catastrophic. Each city represented centuries of magical crafting, thousands of trained warriors, and irreplaceable magical artifacts. Unexpectedly effective? High Diviner Caravas, the youngest member of the council, scoffed. They were primitive mortals on a magic-dead world. How effective could their weapons be? Loor gestured, and a series of magical projections appeared above the chamber floor. The assembled lords watched in stunned silence as recordings showed human weapons tearing through magical shields, shadow flesh, and enchanted armor with terrifying ease. Their primitive weapons launch small pieces of metal at speeds faster than our most powerful kinetic spells, Loor explained. Their flying machines move without magic, their communications work without scrying, and their armies coordinate with an efficiency that puts our forces to shame. Impossible, Lord Vex of the Seventh Circle declared. No civilization could advance so far without magic. There must be some trick, some hidden power we fail to detect. Vizier, standing beside Loor, stepped forward. My lords, I have analyzed every aspect of their technology. There is no magic involved, not even a trace. They have simply found another way. The chamber erupted in heated discussions. The idea that mortals could achieve such power without magic challenged the very foundations of their society. The Shadow Mage Imperium had built its entire civilization on the principle that magical might was the only true path to advancement. Silence. High Chancellor Thex's voice boomed across the chamber, instantly quieting the disorder. Dark Lord Loor, you were given command of the largest invasion force in our history. Explain how you failed so completely. Loor straightened his shoulders. I underestimated them, my lords. We all did. Our divination showed them to be the weakest nation magically, so we assumed they would be the easiest to conquer. We were wrong. Their lack of magic didn't make them weak, it forced them to become strong in ways we never imagined. They have weapons that can strike from beyond the horizon, Vizier added. Machines that fly without wings, vehicles that move without beasts or enchantment. They have harnessed forces we barely understand, electricity, nuclear power, something they call computers, that can process information faster than our quickest divination spells. The council members exchanged troubled looks. High Chancellor Thex stroked his silver beard, his eyes glowing with concern. And you believe they pose a threat to the Imperium? Not yet, Loor replied carefully. Their technology seems limited to their own dimension. But they are advancing rapidly. Within a few decades, they might find ways to breach the dimensional barriers on their own. And if they do? He let the implication hang in the air. Everyone in the chamber understood, if humans could defeat their greatest invasion force while confined to their own dimension, what might they do once they gained the ability to strike back? There's more, Vizier said grimly. We've detected increased magical activity on Earth since our retreat. The humans are studying the remnants of our war cities. They're learning about magic, integrating it with their technology. They're adapting, evolving, becoming stronger. The chamber remained silent as the implications sank in. For millennia, the Shadow Mage Imperium had been unchallenged, expanding across dimensions, conquering world after world. Now, for the first time, they faced not just defeat, but potential extinction. High Diviner Voss rose from her seat. Then we must strike again, immediately. Gather an even larger force, overwhelm them before they can. No, High Chancellor Thex interrupted. We cannot risk another defeat. The loss of more war cities would leave us vulnerable to our other enemies. He turned his ancient gaze to Loor. What do you recommend, Dark Lord? You have seen their power firsthand. Loor took a deep breath. What he was about to propose would be controversial, perhaps even heretical. We must change, my lords. Our reliance on magic has become our weakness. We must study their methods, understand their technology. Perhaps even, learn from them. The chamber exploded in outrage. Lords and diviners shouted accusations of cowardice and treachery. But Loor noticed that the council members remained thoughtfully silent. You would have us abandon our ways? Lord Vex demanded. Become like those magicless mortals? I would have us survive, Loor replied firmly. We have conquered 9 worlds, yes, but all of them were like us, dependent on magic. Earth is different. They show us that there are other paths to power. If we cannot learn from this defeat, we risk becoming obsolete. High Chancellor Thex raised his hand, silencing the chamber once again. Dark Lord Loor speaks wisdom, though it pains us to admit it. We have grown complacent in our power, assuming that magic was the only route to dominance. These humans have proved us wrong, and we would be fools to ignore the lesson. He stood, his ancient frame crackling with power. I propose the formation of a new council, one dedicated to understanding and countering human technology. Dark Lord Loor, despite your defeat, your experience makes you the obvious choice to lead this initiative. Do you accept? Loor bowed deeply. I do, High Chancellor. Then let it be recorded, Thex declared. The Shadow Mage Imperium enters a new age, one where we must learn to fight not just with magic, but with all available means. The humans have taught us a harsh lesson. Let us prove ourselves worthy students. As the chamber slowly emptied, Loor remained at the podium, lost in thought. The humans had humbled him, destroyed his army, and shattered his worldview. Yet somehow, they had also given him and the Imperium something they desperately needed, a reason to change, to grow, to evolve. Dark Lord, Vizier interrupted his thoughts, shall we begin planning the new council? Loor nodded, but his mind was already racing ahead. The humans thought they had merely repelled an invasion, but they had done something far more significant, they had initiated a revolution within the Shadow Mage Imperium itself. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Loor couldn't help but wonder, what other surprises did that remarkable blue world have in store for them, a brave new multiverse. 1 year after the Shadow Mage Imperium's failed invasion, the world had changed in ways nobody could have predicted. The crashed war city in the Nevada desert had become the center of the most ambitious research project in human history, codenamed Project Merlin. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, former quantum physicist and now head of the newly formed Department of Magical Technology Integration, DMTI, stood before Congress, delivering her annual report. In the past 12 months, we've made extraordinary progress in understanding the fundamental principles behind what the invaders called magic, she explained, gesturing to the holographic displays behind her. It turns out that quintessence, their source of magical power, is actually a form of quantum field manipulation that our instruments simply weren't calibrated to detect before. The committee members leaned forward, fascinated despite their usual political posturing. Senator James Chen, head of the Armed Services Committee, raised his hand. And what are the military applications of these discoveries? Elena smiled. That's where things get really interesting, Senator. We've already successfully integrated magical principles with existing technology. The results have been revolutionary. On cue, the holographic display showed footage from recent military exercises. Apache helicopters shimmered with protective wards while firing missiles enhanced with chaos energy. M1 Abrams tanks rolled through magical portals, their main guns loaded with shells that could bend space itself. Marines wore combat suits that could deflect both bullets and spells. But the military applications are just the beginning, Elena continued. We're seeing potential breakthroughs in energy production, medicine, space travel, even environmental restoration. The integration of magic and technology is opening doors we never knew existed. Meanwhile, across the dimensional barrier, the Shadow Mage Imperium was undergoing its own transformation. In the newly constructed technological integration citadel, Dark Lord Loor Moi watched as his mages struggled to understand a disassembled M16 rifle. No, he corrected for what felt like the 1000th time. The power comes from the chemical reaction, not from your quintessence. You have to let the weapon work as designed. Vizier, now his partner in revolutionizing the Imperium's military doctrine, nodded approvingly. They're learning, my lord. Slowly, but they're learning. The changes hadn't come easily. Many in the Imperium had resisted the introduction of mundane technology, seeing it as beneath their magical dignity. But the results were impossible to ignore. The first hybrid units, combining magical abilities with human-style tactical doctrine and equipment, had shown unprecedented effectiveness in training exercises. Have you seen the latest intelligence? Vizier asked quietly, once the other mages had left. Loor nodded grimly. The humans are advancing faster than we anticipated. They're not just copying our magic, they're improving it, integrating it with their technology in ways we never imagined. Back on Earth, in a secret facility beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Sarah Mitchell watched the test of humanity's newest defense system. The Arcane Response Grid, ARG, combined conventional radar with magical detection arrays, creating a defense network that could spot dimensional incursions before they fully manifested. Time to detection, she asked. 0.3 seconds, ma'am, Colonel Rodriguez reported proudly. And the automated response systems are functioning at 99.8% efficiency. Mitchell allowed herself a small smile. They were ready if the Shadow Mage Imperium ever returned, more than ready. But she suspected they wouldn't. The intercepted communications they decoded suggested that the Imperium was too busy dealing with its own internal revolution to consider another invasion. In Silicon Valley, the tech industry had exploded with magical innovations. Apple had just announced the iWand, a sleek device that combined smartphone technology with basic spellcasting capabilities. Google's Project Merlin search promised to index both mundane and magical knowledge. Even Tesla had gotten into the game, with Elon Musk tweeting about quantum-enchanted batteries that could power a car for years. The social impact was equally profound. Universities scrambled to establish departments of magical sciences. Religious leaders and scientists engaged in heated debates about the nature of reality. Philosophy departments had to rewrite entire curricula to account for the confirmed existence of multiple dimensions. But perhaps the most significant changes were happening in unexpected places. In a small classroom in Kansas, a teacher explained to her students how magic and science were two sides of the same coin. In a garage in Mumbai, an entrepreneur combined ancient mystical traditions with modern technology to create a revolutionary water purification system. In a lab in Tokyo, researchers developed the first working translation matrix for interdimensional communications. The United Nations had established the Department of Interdimensional Affairs, though most people just called it the Magic Embassy. Its primary mission was to prepare humanity for eventual peaceful contact with other dimensional civilizations, while maintaining a state of readiness for less friendly visitors. 1 year to the day after the invasion, President Sarah Chen, no relation to the senator, addressed the nation from the Oval Office. My fellow Americans, and citizens of Earth, she began, 1 year ago, we faced what seemed like an insurmountable threat. But in doing so, we discovered something remarkable about ourselves. We learned that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology, or our newfound magical capabilities, or even our military might. It's our ability to adapt, to learn, to grow, and to turn challenges into opportunities. She paused, letting her words sink in. Today, I'm announcing the formation of the International Space and Dimensional Exploration Agency, ISDA. Its mission will be to explore not just the final frontier of space, but the infinite frontiers of other dimensions. We go forward not seeking conquest, but understanding. Not in fear, but in hope. In his chambers in the Shadow Mage Imperium, Loor watched the broadcast through a scrying mirror. The humans continued to surprise him. Instead of becoming more aggressive after their victory, they had chosen to pursue knowledge and understanding. They were preparing for war, yes, he could see the magical weapons platforms they were building in orbit, but they were also preparing for peace. Perhaps, he mused to Vizier, we should consider sending an ambassador next time, instead of an invasion force. Vizier stroked his beard thoughtfully. The council would never approve, yet. Give it time, Loor replied, watching as the human president outlined her vision of a peaceful multiverse. They're not the only ones who can learn and adapt. As the sun set over two very different worlds, both humanity and the Shadow Mage Imperium found themselves on paths they never expected. The failed invasion had started a chain reaction that would reshape not just two civilizations, but potentially the entire multiverse. And somewhere, in a coffee shop in Seattle, Jessica Chen was reviewing a new drink called the Magical Mocha, which actually levitated slightly above the cup. Her blog now had millions of followers, and she just signed a book deal for her memoir, From Barista to War Correspondent, How I Live-Streamed an Alien Invasion. You know what's really magical, she said to her camera. How we turned the worst day in human history into the beginning of our greatest adventure. The universe, it seemed, agreed. And somewhere in the quantum foam between dimensions, new possibilities were already taking shape, waiting to be discovered by a humanity that had learned to combine the best of both worlds, the precision of science and the wonders of magic. The invasion had failed, but in failing, it had succeeded in ways no one could have imagined. It had forced both civilizations to question their assumptions, to grow beyond their limitations, and to imagine new possibilities. And that, perhaps, was the greatest magic of all.